Welcome back to my garden. And if you're a novice gardener like me, or perhaps you've got way more experience, why don't you subscribe to my channel? Cheer me on from the sidelines, or perhaps even give me some sage advice. All you need to do is click the red subscribe button, which you'll find next to the description of the video. And that means next time you open the YouTube app on your phone, your laptop, whatever device you use, one of my videos should pop up for you to see. I have got 3 jobs in the garden today. Number 1 is to cut myself a vase of flowers. Number 2 is to plant out these cyclamen, which my neighbour has given me. And number 3, it's Operation Transplant some lavender bushes and thinking about cutting them back. I'm envisioning almost some topiary balls that I can enjoy as some structure in my garden during the winter months. The question is, where am I going to plant the cyclamen? And I've googled the advice or the answer, and I am going to plant them under this old tree. So this is a pear tree, it's partial shade, and the ground underneath is reasonably dry. So I've got a pot of lovely cyclamen there. It's got beautiful leaves, and although I'm planting this, I'm sort of in 2 minds about it. I wanted my cutting garden to be full of things which are really tall and I could cut, but I never say no to something that's been given to me for free. And probably, in all reality, the dry zone underneath the canopy of my pear tree is probably going to be too dry to plant the cut flowers that I want to be able to crop. And before I get going, I'm going to take away some of the ivy growth. I want to keep it under control and make sure it doesn't take over my beds too much. Let's get planting. Squeeze the plant out of the pot. Some lovely root growth. I'm just going to loosen that up a bit and firm it back into position. And the other little plants are seedlings really in this tray, so I'm going to need to be a little more delicate with how I do this. Or should I just plant a clump at a time? I might break it up slightly. And there, oops, are the individual little bulbs. I think planting clumps is going to be the easy thing to do. And every time I plant something, I find a bit of garden treasure. That's a giant cable tie, which is my husband's seemingly favourite tool in the garden. There's a bit of newspaper there too. So I've got a rubbish pot next to me. All the large stones and general bits of plastic end up. Try not to spoil my nails, keeping my gardening gloves on. So that's the planting done. A little bit of gentle water, just making sure I don't wash away the tiny bulbs. So hopefully those cyclamen will soon become settled and established and will be in flower over the winter months. And while I was planting these, I've noticed some new growth over here. And this was the bare-rooted Japanese anemone I planted in the middle of July. I took the flowers off and used them to create a flower arrangement, and then everything just died. But look, nature is fighting back, and I've got some new growth at the base. Rather pleased about that. You in the garden is my Sedum, the ice plant. So I bought that last week and that's planted. You can just see that it's started to colour up a little bit. Those little buds have got the slightest pale pink starting to develop. And then a bargain with these 3 scabious at £1.50 each. I'm hoping my scabious is going to self-seed, which is the reason why I haven't dead-headed all of them, but I think perhaps the time has come when I should perhaps leave one stem to go to seed and deadhead everything else. And on the subject of deadheading, I've got a bit of deadheading to do over here with my dahlias, but I'm really pleased to see that they're starting to bush out. So seeing as these have probably only been in my garden for about 4 weeks and were bought as container plants, they're really starting to fill out, and I've got new buds developing. Got a stalk there with no flower on it. Broken stems here from when I was carrying it home in my shopping basket. This one is broken, but I can save that as a cut flower. Just neaten everything up a little bit. And perhaps cut some more to enjoy indoors. So it's going to be a garden where there's hardly anything on display, but I keep reminding myself that my garden is here to be used as a cutting garden, not to have a beautiful display in the flower beds. That's my scabious in water. Let's see what else I need to do around here. So I think that is a deadheading for the dahlia, and I did manage to throw that into the compost bin. I shall cut this dahlia to enjoy indoors, so that can go into my little vase of water there. Another dahlia, I think that's been nibbled by the slugs. So it's all looking pretty bare in the dahlia patch. But hopefully next week I'll have some more things to cut. My next task is to tackle this runner here, which I think has come up from our ornamental dark-leafed cherry. Just snapping that off at the base. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. And while I'm here, just a little bit of light weeding around the edges. Getting rid of some of these grassy tufts. There's some wild flowers growing here, so that's why I'm not going in too deeply. Really hairy leaves. I mentioned my pear tree earlier on. That's where I planted the cyclamen. So we do get a lot of windfalls. So would you leave those on the top surface of the soil for the wildlife to eat? Or should I be picking them up and putting them in the compost bin? So I'm pleased to see that my marbled arum italicum pictum leaves are looking good, as is the foxglove, but I just need to trim back a little bit of that ivy, little and often, so it doesn't swamp my beds. And last week I cut off a single stem of my hydrangea to see how well it dried, and I'm pleased to say it was a success, so I might cut a few more stems and get those drying indoors too. Rather pleased to see that my Verbena bonariaris is just developing a small flower there. And then we have a single stem of calendula, a couple of the pale pink cosmos, and then the white physostegia, a single stem left of the astrantia. I'm certainly going to be able to pick myself a few stems of the very dark pink cosmos. Again, I'm cutting for length rather than deadheading. A lovely long stem there. I'll just get rid of the faded foliage at the side. Put that in my vase of water. Bit of deadheading there with the white. So I've got 4 stems left, or 4 flower heads left. Just trying to decide what to do. I might leave myself 2 stems to enjoy, so there's a hint of flower in the garden, and cut the rest. And then once I've deadheaded these 2, I could think about cutting the other stems to enjoy indoors. My next job, having kept the ivy under control a little bit, is to go on the bindweed hunt. So little stems of bindweed here, and I'm using an old fork just to try and lift out as much as I can of the plant. It has this long sort of spaghetti root to it. Sometimes I just pick off the leaves because it can be quite difficult to get down to the root. I think as long as I do this again, little and often, I should be able to keep the bindweed problem under control. There are a few things in the garden which I'm not quite sure about. Is that a weed or a seed? And then over here, underneath my metal pot, where I've got my zinnias, there's this. What is it? Is it? I'm tempted to say a courgette or a pumpkin. The root is right underneath the pot. And then right over here, some more seedlings. So what I'm doing is letting them grow up a little bit to see whether I can then identify what they are, or more importantly, ask my husband what he thinks. Oh, I've just spotted some more bindweed. So I'll have to get my garden fork out. I'm rather pleased with today's crop of flowers, but do watch on to the end of the video where I'm going to do a little bit of gardening with my husband, or under my husband's tutelage. He is going to be taking up the rather leggy lavender which runs up the side of our drive. He's going to give some to our other neighbour, and I'm going to plant hopefully a couple of those lavender balls in my garden and give them a really good haircut and set them up for new growth next year. So how do you dry your hydrangeas? Well, this is the hydrangea that I picked last week, and I would say that it is now well and truly on its way to drying. I'm not sure whether you can hear that if I hold it up to my microphone. But what you do is you cut your flower, take off the leaves, a small amount of water, and put your flower stem in there, and by the time the water has been taken up by the flower or evaporated, that is your indication that your hydrangea should be dry and ready for you to use indoors. So I'm going to do exactly that thing with the hydrangea I picked today, very carefully pulling off the lower leaves. Just slide this other one out. And then put those into my container. So what you have is a double effect here. One, you've got a beautiful vase of hydrangeas to enjoy on your kitchen windowsill, but also they're drying out, so they will see you through many years to come. And I normally keep my hydrangeas until they get really straggly. With anything that you've dried, it becomes brittle over time and collects dust. I would say I've certainly had hydrangea that I've kept in the house, or at least in my workshop, to use for 3 or 4 years. And sometimes what happens And what happens over time is the colour really bleaches out and you end up with these parchment coloured flowers. And if you want to zhuzh in a bit of colour, I take a little bit of spray paint and just a really light psh, 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 with a white or pink, a slight red tone, just to give you that natural tricolour look. And here's a speeded up snippet of my husband and I tackling the first part of the lavender job, which is harvesting the lavender rather than being dug up and being transplanted. As you can see, I have transplanted 4 of the lavender bushes from the front garden. For the first stage in pruning them back was to take a crop of all the flower heads. So you might be wondering what I'm going to do with those, so watch on to the end of the video and I will show you. And then my plan here is that these are going to grow into nice rounded balls to give the garden a little bit of structure. So for me, this is the perfect one. Everything else looks a little bit scrawny, but I do need to cut back some more of the growth. So I'm going to cut out probably 3 to 5 centimetres of the growth, just to keep everything nice and compact, and of course just to make sure that the plant doesn't go into too much of a shock having been transplanted. So I'm envisioning this as a permanent, nice, rounded two-ball ball. Once you start cutting, you never quite know when to stop. At least it looks neat and it looks intentional, and hopefully it will spring back next summer with another bountiful crop. As you can see, I have got quite the crop of lavender, and I'm going to donate it to a local charity, the Mothers of Invention, who are going to make lavender bags. I'm just going to take a few heads for myself, and I'm not actually going to be sewing lavender bags. It was something I did years and years ago. I just don't have the appetite for it anymore, but I was noticing how lovely the scent of the lavender was as I was cropping it. So what I've decided to do is to make my own cheats version of a lavender bag. And inside my back pocket, I've got one of these knee-high tights. So this is clean. This is a trick my mum taught me, that when you get a hole in your tight, you tie a knot in it, you put it in the washing machine, and then you know not to wear it again. But this would make a little great lavender bag. I can put my heads straight into there, tie a knot the other end, put that under my pillow, or perhaps even run my bath water through it, and then I'll be able to enjoy the lovely heady scent of lavender. And of course, I won't be giving those stalks to my friend who's collecting them for the charity. If I cut back the stalks too, I can save these and use them as natural skewers for when I'm testing whether my cakes are ready. Just take off those ends there. That's all for me for now, and I'll see you again next week. And if you've got any gardening advice for me, please do leave it in the comments. I'll probably put those in one of my thrifted little pots. Have I done the right thing? Keep them next to my oven with my lavender, and keep them next to my oven for next time I bake a cake. Perhaps cooking myself ideas for it. A generous handful of these. That's all for me for now. See you again. To be really useful. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and if you have any comments and suggestions, please do let me know. That's all for me for now, and I'll see you again next time.